Hello friends, it's been a while. We're back on the Guzzi. I am taking it apart to resolve some things that have been just pissing me off about it. Here it is, the steering head bearings have worked themselves loose, and they've been that way a while. They kind of got notchy. If I try to tighten them up, they want to lock in the middle, which makes for a pretty interesting ride. So time to replace those. But I've been thinking about this all weekend, and there's just things that are on my nerves about this bike. All the paint coming off, and it's rusting here and there from the humidity it's been subjected to from just sitting, really. The paint on the frame's pretty tore up, and it's just dirty and funky all over. And more importantly, it's got what I believe is I don't know if I can get in there. You can't see it, but the rear main seal seems to be leaking. The rear crankshaft seal, that is. So if I'm gonna tear the front end apart and replace those bearings and get the bike this far apart, and really clean it up, there's no point in really cleaning it inside and out here if it's just gonna continue to leave oil on the ground and throw oil all over the underside of the thing and just keep getting soiled all over again. So I think here's some more. Somebody painted this engine this battleship gray color, and I have always hated that. So I think I'd like to strip all this paint off of the motor, clean all of that mess up, repaint things that need to be repainted, deal with some of the rust that has developed on it, just unsightly stuff that I think I can do better. So, but separate the engine and transmission, replace that seal inside. And if I'm going that far, then the transmission itself is pretty fussy. You have to be careful and very deliberate about upshifting into third. That's really the only problem with the transmission. It's just hard to use, and I'd like to. I don't know if you remember back, I think episode 4 or 5 on this bike. I changed the oil in the transmission, and it looked pretty silvery when it came out. So there's something grinding up in there, and it's only going to get worse. So I think it's time to deal with this thing proper. So while this is apart, I'll be riding that thing, my O2 R1100S, and over there in the corner is my other project, an R90/6 that is running and solid. It just needs tires and a good bit of cleanup. So I think I'll take you with me. I started pulling the some of these things that just have bothered me about this bike. Like all this is rusted all to hell, and there's the muffler's all rusty. I don't know if I can polish that out and just keep it from rusting more. But I don't know, the thing is just, it looks neglected, because it has been. So I want to fix that. Things like this, that's clearly been focus. Well, this has clearly been on fire at one time or another and just taped up and forgotten about. Stuff like that. It's time to bring this thing back to a state that I can be proud to ride. Be proud of it when I ride it. So I'll bring you with me. It's an hour or so later. I've got the final drive and swing arm, rear wheel, all of that mess off it. The mufflers are off. Really doesn't take long to tear these bikes down. So the final drives sitting over there. So now I think I'm going to take the exhaust off and the crash bars off and start unplugging all the electrical and control cables that keep the front end on. Put a block, put a jack and a block of wood onto the front of the engine, and I can take the front wheel, all the brakes and everything loose, get the front end pulled off of the frame, and get to the steering head bearings that started all this. But then these cradle frames are interesting. The Tanti frames is what they call it. You take this bolt loose, there's another one on the other side. You can see how the frame is kind of stuck together right there. So you take this bolt out and the one on the other side, and then back here the rear foot peg has these two bolts. You pull those out, and the two on the other side, and these bottom frame rails just come loose from the rest of the frame. So you can pick the rest of the frame off of the engine and transmission and leave them in this little cradle here. There is an engine mount bolt right here that holds the top of the frame to the engine. I believe there's one. I don't remember exactly. There is one at the bottom that holds the transmission to this bottom piece, but I think that is all that holds the engine to the top. So with everything disconnected from the engine and the front end off, you can just undo all these fasteners, support the engine underneath, just lift the frame off and get it out of the way, and then have complete access to the engine. And I think then I can pull the transmission off and set the engine on the ground. Or maybe set them on the ground as a pair, as a unit, and then pull the transmission off, address this leaky seal, and strip all this crappy paint off. Make a list of what I need to order. Like this plug is all hardened and doesn't seal anymore because it's leaking oil inside here. This is where the transmission and engine come together. The clutch is in there, and it's leaking from the crankshaft seal inside of there. So I'll address that. I got to read up on this transmission, but I believe you undo all these little Allen head fasteners, hex head fasteners back here, and this part comes away from the rest of the tranny case with all the guts, right? So you can set it on that end upright and lift this part off, and all the gears and the shifter drum and everything stay with this part, so you can turn it through and see it perform. And we'll see what's going on in there. I have another transmission that's not built, so diagnosing this one will inform whether to try to fix this one or build up the other one. But either way, I'll check in with you again shortly. So here's where I'm going to leave it tonight. I got the front end tore apart, the brakes off and hanging up. So there's the right side caliper, or the left side caliper. I've just kind of got all the way back here, just kind of sitting down in the battery tray. And the reason for that is the left front caliper is actually driven by the rear brake circuit. So the rear brake operates the left front caliper and the rear caliper. So those are independent of this master cylinder, which only runs that right front caliper. So the brakes are still sealed right now. That may change as I get deeper into this, but now I can put something under the front of the engine and take all this apart, take the wheel off, drop the forks out, and get to those bearings, and then I can come back and get into this rat's nest of wiring and plumbing and prepare to lift the top of the frame away from the bottom, leaving just the engine and transmission sitting there. And I can get all that cleaned up, start looking at this oil leak in between those two, and hopefully get into the transmission, see what's coming apart in there. But that's all for tonight. Quick update for you. I took it apart. All apart. There's pieces of motorcycle everywhere. There's the frame loose from the motor. I got the transmission on the floor over here, and the transmission's full of oil. Well, the bell housing where the clutch runs is full of oil, and there's oil in places where there shouldn't be, which is what I expected to find in here. So the transmission input seal is leaking. The rear gasket, I think, might be leaking. Definitely leaking from the, it won't focus, sorry, the shifter, the shift shaft right there. There's an O-ring in there. And there's an O-ring for the clutch release rod in there. There's more O-rings. So there's O-rings all over this thing. There's seals front and back, and where the drive shaft comes out there's oil there too. There's oil everywhere, coming out of every orifice of this thing. The crankshaft seal, which I suspected is what was leaking, is also weeping around it. So even if it's fine, and this is just residue from somewhere else, because you can see there's oil all over this gasket under this little vent tube. This is the crankcase breather tube, and this gasket was definitely leaking something terrible. But even if this seal is still good, it doesn't make sense to come this far and not replace it. So gonna do that. Gonna clean when it was stored in that barn for 5 years, the dirt daubers made their homes in all the vents, and I couldn't see that with the engine in the frame. So gonna get all of that out of there. Gonna repaint all of the, well, just gonna repaint the whole engine. Gonna strip off all this ugly gray stuff that somebody did, and not sure yet if I'm gonna leave it bare metal or paint it silver or black. I don't know yet. Oh yeah, there's another, this gasket for the neutral light right there is leaking. Everything is leaking, so gonna get a complete gasket and seal kit for engine and transmission, and just redo all of that. So here's the clutch and flywheel. The clutch has plenty of meat on it left. It's a Barnett, an aftermarket that I'm not sure is made anymore. I don't know. I put it on there some years ago, maybe 10. It's maybe been 10 years since I put this clutch in, and there's plenty of friction material left, but they are soaked in oil because of all this mess. And to their credit, they did not slip, at least not perceptibly. So I'm gonna run that stuff again. I think it's fine. And this is yep. Sorry. So this is a great opportunity to clean the whole thing. And the frame over there, well, here's the bottom part of the frame, and you can see it's just been leaking and accumulating dirt and rust, and it's not, I bet it would clean up okay, actually. I repainted all this stuff maybe 7-8 years ago. Repainted the frame. This is the last time I had it this far apart, when I repainted everything. So there's the rear drive that I chose to paint silver, but leave that black. I'm still not sure that was the right decision. I may redo that, but it's a good time to replace all those seals too. The starter, I'm going to open it up and check the brushes. Certainly clean the commutator, the fork tubes. Excuse me, the fork legs are fine. Sorry, can't talk today. The fork tubes are fine. The lowers are scuffed up and scratched and could use repaint, so now's a good time to do that. The other, just every little chrome piece on here has got rust and pitting, so I'm gonna try to find a chrome shop locally here in the Denver area and see what they can do for me about that. And the crash bars, the grab bar that goes behind the seat, and the frame, you know, it's got some rust. It's certainly dirty all over. I'm going to fix some of my rat's nest wiring that's been done by me. I can't really blame anybody else for the state that the wiring's in right now, just because I wanted to get it together and ride. But I have other options available to me now. So this is a chance to do some of this stuff right and get this bike shipshape again. I got the steering head apart and the bearings out. I got new bearings already. That's really what started this whole mess, is the steering head. The steering bearings were notchy, and I wanted to replace them. The tank has a dent in it, and the paint is pretty tired. It's not bad. It could go, but if I got to take a dent out of the tank anyway, then I might as well repaint and just clean everything up. So here we go. I'll check back in once I get my parts ordered and start putting this thing back together. Thanks for watching.